Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you all for holding on the line. We're just waiting for a couple more people to join the webinar, but I think we now have everyone who's was registered to join has now dialed in. As mentioned, my name is Charles Green. I'm part of the marketing team here at Bellatrix Software, and today we're going to be discussing agile development and exploring some of the lessons that we've learned with our customers as they seek to implement agile. Now, as we know, implementing Agile is really tough, and while many organizations will finally experience the benefits of Agile methodologies, implementing and transitioning to Agile can be particularly challenging. This is even more likely to be the case with offshore Agile or distributed Agile, where teams do not sit together. And this is really where we specialize here at Bellatrix Software. For those not familiar, Bellatrix is a nearshore provider of R&D product development services. In our experience, we've found that to ensure a seamless transition, it's really critical to learn from others' mistakes. So here we spoke with our leading experts in Agile who have experience with more than 300 Agile development projects to see where Agile projects typically go astray. So I'm very fortunate to be joined by Diana Marin, team lead and a certified Scrum Master. She joined Bellatrix Software in 2004. She started off as a developer, and then she transitioned to leading some of the medium-sized teams here at Bellatrix. And since 2011, she's been a Scrum Master for some of our larger projects. So Diana, thank you firstly very much for joining us. Let's jump right into the heart of the webinar. What is really the number one issue or challenge that you typically see with Agile?
Thanks, Charles. Well, in the context of Scrum, I have some, really for me, the key, the number one is communication, mainly when we are working remotely. So I can remember some examples, mainly focusing on effectiveness, the media structures, and the availability. So one of those is when we work with a client on the food industry who had 4 teams with us of 7 people each, and where we help them develop Java applications. Here we had 2 situations. The first one, it was regarding the architect. Each team has its own architect, and I remember that one of those wanted to be in a permanent call with the developers. So this didn't help the productivity of the project since none of their time was valuable. And the other case was regarding the quality coordinator. He wanted to have daily meetings with all the QA members throughout the different teams in order to notify them on everybody on different topics of the area, also to generate a space for learning lessons. The problem here was that they were having 30 people, more or less, from different parts of the world met every day for 1 hour. And obviously then those guys needed to participate on the other typical Scrum meetings with their teams. An addition is that the coordinator usually couldn't finish the meetings on time, and sometimes the topic schedule for those were not discussed at all. I remember the team complained on the long meetings, not productive. Sometimes they couldn't hear the presenter, or the topics were really tedious since they were showing code from their scripts of automation. So the learning lesson here is that, well, communication, as I said before, is the key of this methodology, much more when working remotely. And you need to be sure that you are communicating effectively, not for being talking all day long or for doing many meetings. That means that you are really communicating. It is more than that. You need to try to go straight to the point, be clear enough, take advantage of the already set Scrum meetings to discuss everything which is needed and avoid wasted time. By sure, you need obviously prepare the topics with anticipation if you are going to prepare a meeting, and be strict with the time you set. Regarding communication also, we need to be careful in the communication tool that we choose. I think that you should have also experienced ever been part of a long chain of emails of discussion over a topic involving each time more and more people. And at the end, no one understands which is the real problem or need. Besides, I think that how many times it had happened that you realize on an email requesting immediate feedback, but by the time you read it, it is really late to respond and provide any help. So, as a suggestion, you need to agree with the team the medias to use according to necessity. For example, if you need a quick response, call the person directly through phone, Skype, Hangout, whatever. If you need to alert your team or somebody about something that is not an urgent problem and probably kind of formal information, you could send an email. And then, if after that email you receive several questions, by sure, it should be better to make a quick call to close that discussion. And also, you need to review when chatting should be appropriate. I would say that probably for a short discussion. In addition, probably it's important to set a chat room for the complete team so as everybody could be involved in the same conversations or on important notifications for everybody on the team. And one more thing regarding communication is regarding availability. I cannot forget a lead that was always busy on meetings and guys could not have a quick response from him. Also, it was difficult for me to schedule the Scrum meetings since there was no free time on his agenda. So my recommendation is that all people involved in the project have to be available and with a good character to contribute, since any concern should be solved immediately, even more if it is blocking any team member.
Mm-hmm. I guess what I'm hearing there, Diana, is that it's, while we all may think that we're good at communicating with one another, it's absolutely vital in Agile to have some agreement and some coordination between the different team members with regard to communicating, how you communicate with one another, what kind of tool you typically use, whether that is mentioned as a Skype or Hangout or instant messaging, for example, but some agreement as to exactly how you want to communicate with one another. And I guess that kind of relates to the next point, which I know we want to discuss, which is regarding the importance of sharing or agreeing on the Scrum process. I think it's very closely related to communication. But perhaps since your experience, you have some stories you can tell there, or some of your experiences there.
Yeah, really, another agreement that really you need to have is, for example, sharing the Scrum process. This remembers me another situation with another client, in this case on the cosmetics industry, who had a team with us of 6 people to help them develop mobile applications. From the beginning of the project, we asked about the Scrum process they wanted us to follow, but we never received a response regarding this, and with the addition that our main contact, kind of leader, was also new in the company, so he just followed his own rules over the company's one. This situation carries us into almost 3 months of disagreement in the way we were moving the process, many back and forth until we learned how they wanted us to move on. So my recommendation is that when wrapping up a project, you need to be sure you understand and agree on how you should proceed. If you have already worked with a Scrum on different projects, you should have realized that not all the clients or projects follow the same methodology or in a strict way or in the same way. And for this fact, it is really important that the client could communicate to the complete team how he carries out the process so that everybody could be on the same page. Then, as the project proceeds, by sure the process could start changing smoothly with introduction of new team members and their feedback after each iteration. But I say that it is a good learning lesson for the ramping up of the project.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes absolute sense. Perhaps I should mention at this point, if there are any questions from the audience, feel free to type into the chat on the webinar, and we will be happy to answer your questions. Or even if you have particular questions as we're going through this presentation, feel free to type into the chat. We're more than happy to make this more interactive. So really, Dan, as you're mentioning there, you spoke there that it's important to share and agree upon the Scrum process, and you gave that example where there was that one contact which one person who just simply disagreed with or he decided to do it his own way, different from the way in which his company wanted to work with Agile, or perhaps differently from how you would expect to work in an Agile manner, according to the Agile Manifesto. So in these situations, I imagine it's important to be able to escalate that if necessary. So how does that typically work, and do you have any examples where it's been necessary to escalate that within the client organization?
Yeah, my sure is that you need somebody on the other side to help you on those kind of issues. That was one example, the one that I just mentioned. Another could be when we were working for a chemical industry who had two teams with us, a team of more or less 5 developers each, and we helped them developing Java web applications, following Scrum, obviously, as methodology. The problem here was that the architect in charge of doing the code reviews of what our teams had developed was not polite at all, and also did not provide any help on his comments. On the contrary, sometimes his comments were a little aggressive. So, as you can imagine, this person was an obstacle for the team. Guys were really disgusted with him, and the team was in a really bad humor, having consideration that guys couldn't commit their code until this person could approve those code reviews. So I had to have several conversations with him, but due to his character, he never assumed the situation and therefore never changed it. It is a typical case where it is really important to have communication with a higher role in the hierarchy on the client side that could be aware of these kind of situations and could take any action for the benefits of the team and their production. Here I make emphasis on the issues that happen on the client side. Probably the role I refer to could be a meta Scrum Master or a project manager that could mediate on aligning the work the pro owner, for example, or analyst or an architect, if they are on his side, are doing. This is seen sometimes, even though when having a Scrum Master on the team side, there are some situations that are difficult to, let's say, be requested or accepted. So it is better to have somebody else there to mediate or push for a solution.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's critically important again to emphasize that having that clear escalation path, both on the client side but also on the provider's side, in case any issues do emerge. I think related to that, and perhaps brings us to our a smooth transition to our the next point which we kind of want to highlight in this presentation, is that even it's critically important that there is that clear communication, as we previously discussed, with the client and with the service provider. But more than that, it's also important to share the project, the projections, the broader picture of what the client is expecting, to help make teams make their participation much easier. So perhaps what examples or what experiences have you had there?
Well, I can mention, for example, an example on with a project for a pharmaceutical industry. It was a good experience, so it helped me to realize the importance of this fact. It was a client who had 2 medium-sized teams with us for different products, both of them with Java technology, and release by release, they plan and share with us their roadmap. which we also could follow up weekly, and obviously if there was any deviation, we could discuss over that. And at the same time, we could see what was next, and that was really important for everybody. So the problem of not having that projection of the product make the engineering team not be as productive as they could, in the sense that they cannot participate over information that they are not managing. For example, then having to re-engineer the code due that many technical aspects were not taken into consideration. Due to that lack of technical information on the projection of the product. This is since they cannot imagine the whole picture if the client can offer that information. This said, if the client shares with the team his goals and projections, he allows the team participating on the product, what could facilitate the contribution from their role. Also, they could help on anticipating the changes.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also there's maybe an added dimension there that also with regard to the motivation for the team members, that once the external team really understands the client's projections, their goals, their aspirations, it also has a big impact upon motivation. It helps keep the attrition levels low. Here at Bellatrix, we sometimes talk about a story when a man walks into a park and he sees someone breaking some bricks, and he says, "What are you doing?" And he's breaking the bricks very slowly, and he's just breaking them. And then the man keeps walking, and then he sees the next person, and he's frantically breaking bricks, passionately breaking bricks, and he asks, "Hey, what are you doing?" And then the guy replies, "I'm building a cathedral." And it's a very different perspective once you can understand and you can share into the broader project and what the ultimate goals are. Moving on slightly, also clearly testing is a critical issue with regard to Agile, and Agile has some important impact upon testing and traditional testing practices. So what about in your experience? How do developers and the quality assurance people, how do they typically work together? What experiences have you had there? Have there been difficulties there, perhaps with regard to communication?
Well, yeah, it's another of the challenges. Here, I could use many examples through different projects and clients, since it is more an inner team behavior that has no relation at all with the type of project or client. For instance, I can mention that situations where the developer completed the user story, and when the quality assurance guy ran the test cases he had created, reading the same requirements, there were many behaviors that the developer had not contemplated. So then after a discussion, they realized that both had different interpretations. In another opportunity, for example, the developer had not read the complete requirements, and in many others, when they requested the approval of the pro owner at a very late stage, both guys realized that they were not doing exactly what the pro owner wanted. So it had happened in many projects that even though having these roles on the same office, they are not working together on the tickets from the beginning. The real problem is when they realize on the disagreement at a very late stage. So it is really important that since the analysis of the user story, both quality assurance guy and developers, and also if necessary, the pro owner right now, could participate and agree on the requirements. With that information, the developer can start coding, and also the quality guy can start doing the test cases. If they could work in this way, we can avoid many back and forth between QAs and developers and unnecessary delays on the story. If both members understand the same, then both should be working over the same requirement and prevent developing or testing a different thing.
Mm-hmm. You kind of mentioned that it's important to avoid that back and forth between QA and development, and you want to avoid unnecessary delays. One aspect, getting closely related to that is also regarding, the key roles within the Agile team, and how important it is to clearly define exactly whose role is what, and what individuals should be doing, what is their what are their expectations within the team. So have you had any experiences there?
Yeah, for example, regarding the roles and the bad definition of them from the beginning. For example, I started with a new project for a remote client on the shipping industry. In the wrapping up stage, they assigned to me the role of Scrum Master and provided me two persons from the company to be communicated with. One should support me in the proceeding of the company, and the second one was kind of lead developer. Here, when the problem arises, that the person who should introduce me in the company process, instead he wanted me to provide him the status of the team, something like a meta Scrum Master, but it wasn't really the role the company wanted for him. And on the other hand, the second person, whose role was leader developer, pretending to be a mix of several roles. He communicated the business requirement to the team, he prepared the capacity plan and the goals of the sprint, he did the code reviews, he established the processes to follow, even if they were against the company ones. So that situation carried us to a complete status of uncertainty, and it was totally, I as a Scrum Master was totally lost in my role. So, as a suggestion, when ramping up a project, the roles and responsibilities of each person should be well defined in order to prevent overlap of activities, confusions, and frustration of the team.
Yeah, I think absolutely that confusion and frustration which can emerge if you don't have those well-defined roles is something which is clearly going to impact productivity. It's going to impact the final product. I think we've discussed here a range of different experiences and really spanning the whole gauntlet of your wide experience here at Bellatrix. So I think really in summary, I can please let me perhaps summarize in the sense that we've really heard that communication is absolutely critical for Agile. It's even more so when you have distributed teams. If you're working with a partner, that communication is really the number one issue. And it, as mentioned, even though we may think ourselves as good communicators, we need to have some agreement on what kind of communication is appropriate at what particular time and what communication tool we want to use. You've also mentioned there that it's important to share Scrum processes, that it's often the case that not all organizations use Agile exactly the same. Often there are modifications, there are adjustments, there are people who use it very lightly, other people stick very rigidly to the methodology, but it's important that everyone is on the same page. We've talked about a clear escalation path in order to solve problems both on the client side and also on the provider side as well. And also, don't forget the impact that Agile has on testing. Developers and the QAs need to work much more closely together. There's been also a lot of discussion in the industry more broadly about the impact that Agile has on the testing center of excellence, which was for many years the typical approach companies had. And it's clear that Agile has an impact on that. And finally, it's important to note that it's important to bring in the external partners as closely as possible, share the ideas, share the aspirations of the engagement of the project, so we know it can really bring that provider in and bring that expertise to bear as much as possible. I know we only have a few minutes left. I should mention that we will be following up this webinar with another lessons learned webinar in the new year in 2015. And we will also be sharing a link to the slides and the recording of this webinar straight after this as well. But at this point, we'd like to open up for any questions from the audience. Okay. And just whilst we were waiting to see if any questions come in, just from my side, a I'd be interested to know, Deanna, what typically happens if there is, for example, a larger project when you need maybe perhaps more people in the Agile team. We know ideally, according to the Agile Manifesto, there should be between 7 and 8 people. Sometimes that may not always be practical, or you may have other concerns. What would be your advice there?
Well, really, probably it doesn't matter if you add a couple of resources more in the team. The other possibility that you could manage is open a new team and probably take somebody else from the other in order not to have a, a different team from the others and have more or less the two or three in with in a speed, a similar speed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Actually, I see we have one question on the chat, which is asking, are there any specific roles which we should, always keep at the client side?
Well, as I mentioned in one of the topics before, really I could think on having the project manager or the meta scrum master on the client side, for the sense of having there somebody in the higher hierarchy in order to solve any problems on the client side. I think that the rest of the roles could be perfectly managed on the delivery, I mean, in the location where the delivery team is.
Okay, excellent. Um, I see there that we're nearly at the end of the half hour. So with that, I would like to thank everyone for taking the time out of their busy schedules to join us for this call today. If there are any questions which come to mind after this call or when you're reviewing the slides, feel free to get in touch with the team here at Bellatrix. You can see here all different ways in which you can reach out to us. We'd be more than happy to continue the discussion. But with that, again, I'd like to thank you for your time, and from the team here at Bellatrix, wish everyone a very pleasant holiday season over the next few weeks.
Thank you, you're welcome.
Y ahí se fueron casi todos, y apenas se vaya el último.